I had been stationed at the Kalvor Nexus for 3 cycles when the humans arrived, and let me tell you, nobody was expecting what came next. The Nexus was supposed to be impenetrable, 500 meters of reinforced duratanium, shielded by graviton fields that could deflect a supernova's worth of energy. The collective had spent 2 centuries building it, pouring resources from 40 different species into making sure that nothing, absolutely nothing, could breach those walls. And then Webb showed up with a toolkit and a smile. My name is Threll, and I am a maintenance coordinator for the Kalvor Security Division. I have 6 arms, compound eyes that can see in 17 different spectrums, and a very specific job making sure our defensive systems stay operational. Before the humans came, that job was boring. Gloriously, peacefully boring. The alert came through on a standard afternoon. Well, afternoon by station time. Space doesn't really do afternoons, but we pretend because it keeps everyone sane. Threll, we have an unscheduled vessel approaching Vector 7. My supervisor Krenth buzzed through the comm. His species communicated through a combination of clicks and whistles that the translator tried its best to render into something comprehensible. Classification? I asked, not particularly concerned. Unscheduled vessels happened, usually traders who got lost or diplomatic envoys who couldn't read a calendar. Unknown, small craft, single occupant reading. They're requesting, that made my primary stomach clench. Nothing good ever followed an O from Krenth. What? They're requesting permission to knock. They're requesting permission to knock. I stared at my console. Then I checked my translator settings because surely I had misheard. To knock? That is what the message says. Quote, "Hello there. I need to get inside but your door seems stuck. Mind if I knock?" End quote. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh.
Our door?
The Kalvor Nexus didn't have a door. It had 73 access ports, each one protected by enough security to give a military AI a migraine, but no door. Deny the request, I said, returning to my maintenance logs, and forward them to proper docking procedures. Already did. They responded with, "That's adorable, be there in 5 minutes." Now, in my defense, I had never met a human before. I'd heard the stories. Everyone had. Humans were the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel, and they'd made quite the entrance into galactic society by accidentally solving a mathematical problem that had stumped the collective's best minds for 6,000 years. Some human named Jessica Ortega had apparently scribbled the solution on a napkin while eating something called a burrito. But stories are just stories, right? Surely the tales of human stubbornness were exaggerated. Surely no species could actually be as persistent, as creatively destructive, as magnificently idiotic as the rumors suggested. I was about to learn otherwise. 5 minutes later, exactly as promised, my console lit up like a festival display. Threll, Krenth's voice had gone up 3 octaves. Section 42. Something is happening. I pulled up the sensor feed, and felt my translator chip briefly shut down as my brain tried to process what it was seeing. The human was knocking. Actually knocking. On our impenetrable wall. But here's the thing about humans that nobody tells you in the orientation materials. They don't do anything the normal way. This wasn't a polite tap tap tap. This was a systematic, calculated assault disguised as a friendly greeting. Webb, as I would later learn his name, had attached what appeared to be a modified mining laser to a rhythmic oscillator, which was itself connected to a harmonic frequency analyzer, and he was using this contraption to quite literally knock on our wall in a pattern that exploited the natural resonance frequency of duratanium. Is he trying to sing our wall to death? I asked, watching in horrified fascination as the readings fluctuated. Worse, said Palix, our chief engineer, who had suddenly appeared beside me. Her species didn't believe in personal space, which was inconvenient during emergency situations. He's found the sympathetic vibration point. If he keeps that up for another 3 minutes, Section 42 will... She didn't need to finish. We all watched as microfractures began appearing in the scanner readings. Stop him, Krenth shrieked, which my translator rendered with appropriate capital letters. I opened a channel to the human vessel. Unknown craft. Cease your activity immediately. You are damaging collective property. The knocking stopped. Thank the 7 moons. Then a voice came through, cheerful, and entirely too relaxed for someone who had just committed what amounted to aggressive door ringing. Hey, sorry about that.
He didn't mean to scratch the paint.
Listen, I really need to get inside. I have a delivery for someone named Threll. Package says it's urgent. I looked at Palix. She looked at me. We both looked at Krenth. I didn't order anything, I said slowly. Well, that's between you and Galactic Shipping, Marcus replied. But I'm not leaving until I hand this off. Union rules. Also, fun fact, I've got enough charge in this baby. There was a sound of him patting something metallic. To keep knocking for about 6 more hours. Might want to open up before we find out if your wall can handle the full concerto. This was extortion. Cheerful, polite, but definitely extortion. You cannot threaten a collective facility, Krenth said, trying to sound authoritative and failing miserably. Threaten? Who's threatening? I'm knocking. It's what we do. You know, back on Earth it's considered rude not to answer when someone knocks. But hey, different cultures and all that. I can wait. The knocking resumed. Palix pulled up a structural integrity report that made my secondary stomach join my primary one in clenching. He'll breach the outer layer in 4 hours at this rate, she said quietly. And once he's through the first layer, the cascade effect on the secondary shielding will what? Let's just say we'd need to evacuate sections 38 through 46. That was 3,000 residents. 3,000 very important residents, including 2 ambassadors and a judge who was currently presiding over a very delicate trade dispute. I made a decision that I knew I would regret. Open access, port 42 Delta, I said. Minimum aperture. Get him inside before he knocks our station into spare parts. The access port opened, a mere 2 meters wide. The human's ship, which looked like someone had welded a cargo container to an engine and called it a day, squeezed through with centimeters to spare. Marcus Webb stepped out of his vessel in the docking bay, and I got my first look at a human in person. He was tall. That was the first thing I noticed. Humans were supposed to be average height according to the files, but average is different when you're looking at someone who stands on 2 legs instead of 4. He wore what appeared to be a standard flight suit covered in pockets. So many pockets. What did humans need all those pockets for? His face was decorated with something called a beard, which my research later told me was just hair that humans allowed to grow on their faces for reasons that ranged from cultural to I forgot to shave. He was smiling, which among humans apparently showed friendliness but looked vaguely threatening when you had never seen one before. Threll? He asked, looking at our welcoming committee of security officers, all of whom had their weapons ready. That's me, I said, stepping forward because someone had to and everyone else suddenly seemed very interested in their shoes. While Krenth didn't wear shoes. But you understand the sentiment. Package for you. Marcus reached into one of his many pockets and pulled out a small container. Sign here, please. I looked at the container, looked at the human, looked at the section of wall that was now showing stress fractures that would cost a fortune to repair. What is it? No idea. I just deliver them.
Oh, but the manifest says it's from Earth.
Something called a get well soon card? I'm not sick. Me read. Well, someone thinks you are. Or they got the wrong Threll? Is there another Threll on this station? There were actually 14 other Thrells, but I wasn't about to tell him that. I took the package and signed his datapad with one of my middle arms. Great, well I'll be going then. Oh, quick question. Do you guys have a cafeteria? I'm starving and I hear station food is usually pretty decent. Krenth made a sound like a boiling kettle. You nearly destroyed our wall and now you want lunch? I asked, impressed despite myself, at the sheer audacity. Nearly is the key word, Marcus said, grinning wider. I was actually being pretty careful. Back home we have this saying measure twice, knock once, although usually it's cut once, but the principle applies. And yeah, knocking works up an appetite. If you point me toward food, I promise not to knock on anything else. There was something in the way he said promise that made it sound less like reassurance and more like a friendly threat. Section 12, Palix said quietly. Tell him Section 12 has a cafeteria. Marcus Webb tipped an imaginary hat, which my cultural database informed me was a gesture of politeness from old Earth customs, and wandered off in search of food. I opened the package he had delivered. Inside was indeed a card, decorated with images of flowers and containing a message in standard collective script. Hope you feel better soon. The humans send their regards. I'm not sick, I repeated to nobody in particular. No, Krenth said, still staring after the departed human. But our wall certainly is. That should have been the end of it. Marcus Webb should have eaten his lunch, gotten back in his ridiculous ship and left us to repair the damage and file incident reports for the next month. But remember what I said about humans. They don't do anything the normal way. 3 hours later, alarms started blaring across the station. Not the polite please pay attention alarms, the everyone is going to die alarms. I rushed to the command center to find absolute chaos. Every screen was red, every sensor was screaming, and right in the middle of it all was Marcus Webb, calmly eating what appeared to be noodles from a disposable container. "What did you do?" I demanded. "Me? Nothing." "Well, okay, I accidentally leaned against a panel in the cafeteria, but that shouldn't have caused all this." "What panel?" Palix asked, her voice very, very quiet. "The red one. It looked like a table," the Palix said, and I had never heard her sound quite so done with the universe. Was the master override for the southern Graviton stabilizers. That explains the wobbling. The station was indeed wobbling. The entire Kalvor Nexus, 500,000 tons of collective engineering, was wobbling like a toy in a bathtub. "Can we fix it?" Krent asked, looking at our engineers. "Sure," one of them said. "We just need to reboot the Graviton system, which requires shutting down life support to sections 20 through 60 for approximately 45 minutes. "Do it," I said. Because there wasn't a choice. A wobbling space station was a dead space station, eventually. "Actually," Marcus said, still eating his noodles with infuriating calm, "I might be able to help." Every eye in the command center turned to him. "You've helped enough," Krent said flatly. "No, seriously. I used to work on atmospheric processors back in the Sol system. Different technology, sure. But the principles are the same. Graviton stabilizers work by creating a balanced field through synchronized emitters, right? So if one emitter is out of phase, you don't need to reboot the whole system. You just need to recalibrate the timing sequence." He said this, while twirling noodles around his eating utensil. Twirling noodles, while our station wobbled toward potential destruction. "That's actually correct," Palix said slowly. "But recalibrating requires accessing the primary control node, which is in a sealed chamber that can only be opened with 3 separate authorization codes during a non-emergency period." Or, Marcus said, setting down his food and cracking his knuckles, which made a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Someone could knock on it until the locking mechanism gives up." "Absolutely not," Krent shouted. "No more knocking." But I was looking at the structural integrity readings. We had maybe 20 minutes before the wobbling caused catastrophic damage to the docking ports. An hour before the wobbling caused catastrophic damage to everything else. "Do it," I said. "But I'm coming with you. Someone needs to make sure you don't knock a hole in the station and vent us all into space." Marcus grinned. "Awesome. I work better with an audience." We ran. Well, I ran. Marcus jogged, still somehow managing to look relaxed despite the emergency lights flashing and the station tilting at increasingly alarming angles. The primary control node was in the absolute center of the Nexus, accessible only through a maze of corridors that had been specifically designed to prevent unauthorized access. Every 10 meters there was another security door, another verification panel, another obstacle. Marcus knocked on each one, not the aggressive resonance knocking from before, but something different, gentle, almost conversational, and incredibly, impossibly. The doors opened. "How are you doing that?" I asked after the 7th door clicked open without any authorization codes. "Trade secret. But between you and me, most security systems are designed by engineers who think in straight lines. You just have to convince the mechanism that you belong on the other side. It's all about the rhythm. Doors are like people. They respond better to politeness than force. You literally threatened to tear down our outer wall." "Yeah, but I knocked first. That's the important part." We reached the primary control node chamber. Unlike the other doors, this one was serious, quantum-locked, biometrically sealed, and protected by a graviton field that could crush most species into paste. Marcus looked at it for a long moment, tilting his head like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. "Okay," he said finally. "This one's gonna be tricky. Might want to stand back." "What are you going to do?" "Knock politely and hope it answers." He placed his hand on the door. Just placed it there, palm flat against the surface. Then he started humming, a low rhythmic sound that seemed to vibrate through my entire body. The door hummed back. I'm not joking. The massive, incredibly secure door began resonating with the same frequency as Marcus's humming. And then, like it had simply decided to cooperate, it opened. "After you," Marcus said, gesturing politely. Inside, The control node looked like a nightmare of crystallized circuitry and holographic interfaces. Marcus studied it for exactly 5 seconds before reaching into one of his many pockets and pulling out a small tool. "What is that?" I asked. "Multi-driver. Every human with sense carries one. My dad gave me this when I turned 16, said it's the only tool you really need if you know how to use it." He made 3 adjustments, 3 small adjustments. The station stopped wobbling. Just like that, the alarms ceased. The red lights went green. The Graviton stabilizers synchronized perfectly. "There we go," Marcus said, putting his tool away. "Good as new. Better, actually. Your timing was off by 0.003 milliseconds. Nobody would notice under normal conditions, but it would have caused problems eventually." I stared at him. This human had nearly destroyed our wall, accidentally disabled our Graviton stabilizers, and then fixed a problem we didn't even know we had. "Why?" I asked. "Why deliver a get-well-soon card yourself? Why risk breaching a collective facility?" Marcus smiled, and this time it looked genuine, rather than threatening.
"Okay, cheers. The card is from my grandmother.
She's 93, stubborn as a mule, whatever that is. And she heard that a Threll on this station helped her friend's daughter get into a good university program. Apparently, you wrote a recommendation letter. She wanted to say thank you, but she doesn't trust digital messages, says they lack soul." I remembered the letter. 6 months ago, a human student had applied to the Kalvor Institute. Brilliant kid. I'd been happy to recommend her. "So you nearly tore down our wall because your grandmother doesn't like email?" "Pretty much. Also, the job was on the way. And honestly, I was curious to see if I could do it. We humans, we like challenges."
And walls.
He patted the chamber's doorframe affectionately. "Walls are just invitations. No wall in the universe survives once a human decides to knock. It's not a threat. It's just how we're wired. We see a barrier. We wonder what's on the other side. And then we knock until someone answers, or the door opens, or the wall comes down. Usually in that order." "That's terrifying," I said honestly.
Yeah.
Marcus agreed cheerfully. "We get that a lot." He left after that, climbing back into his weird ship and launching off to wherever humans go when they're not knocking on things. The repair crew spent 3 days fixing the stress fractures in Section 42, and I spent 3 days filing reports that nobody believed until they reviewed the sensor logs. Krent retired the following month, said he was too old for this kind of stress. Palix got promoted to his position and immediately instituted a new protocol. If a human shows up at the Nexus, just open the door.
It's faster and cheaper than the alternative.
As for me, I kept the get-well-soon card on my desk. It's a reminder that humans don't see walls the way the rest of us do. They see puzzles, challenges, invitations, and they always knock first, even when nobody wants them to. The 6 months after Marcus Webb turned our impenetrable fortress into a percussion instrument, I thought I had seen the last of human knocking. I was wrong. So spectacularly, magnificently wrong. The transmission came through on a quiet morning. Well, as quiet as a space station gets when you're housing 50,000 beings from 100 different species, all of whom have different ideas about acceptable noise levels. "Threll, incoming message from Earth," my assistant Vorna said, sliding up to my workstation on her species' characteristic slime trail. I had long since given up trying to keep my floors clean. "What do they want?" "They are requesting permission to send a diplomatic delegation. Says it's regarding the Vault of Ancients incident." My blood went cold. All 4 chambers of my circulatory system clenched simultaneously, which is a uniquely unpleasant sensation. The Vault of Ancients was not something we talked about, ever. It was the collective's most secure facility, located 3 systems away, containing artifacts from the predecessor civilization that had ruled the galaxy before any current species had even developed opposable thumbs, things that could manipulate space-time, weapons that could crack planets, knowledge that made our most advanced technology look like stone tools. It was guarded by the Sentinel fleet, protected by quantum encryption that would take 1,000,000 years to crack, and buried inside an asteroid with shielding that could withstand direct hits from supernova-level explosions. And according to the message blinking on my screen, 3 days ago, a human had knocked on it. "Tell them yes," I said wearily. "And prepare guest quarters, comfortable ones if we make them uncomfortable. They might start knocking on things here." The diplomatic delegation arrived 2 days later. I expected suits, politicians, blood. The kind of serious, boring people that species usually send when they want to smooth over an intergalactic incident. Instead, I got Marcus Webb, a woman who introduced herself as Captain Yuki Tanaka, and a very large man carrying what appeared to be a musical instrument case. Threll, my friend, Marcus said, shaking my primary hand with enthusiasm. Humans and their obsession with hand contact. Good to see you again. How's your wall doing? Repaired, reinforced, and now monitored by 6 additional sensor arrays specifically calibrated to detect knocking frequencies. Impressive. I'm honored. Captain Tanaka stepped forward. She was shorter than Marcus, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything in the docking bay within seconds. Coordinator Threll, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I apologize for the short notice, but the situation with the vault is somewhat time-sensitive. Time-sensitive, as in your people need to stop trying to break into it immediately. Time-sensitive, as in we already got inside, and you need to know what we found. The silence that followed could have been weaponized. Inside, I repeated slowly. You got inside the Vault of Ancients, the most secure facility in collective space, the place that hasn't been opened in 4,000 years. 3,842 years, the large man with the instrument case said. His voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could bend hull plating with his bare hands, if you're counting from the last documented access, which we did because accuracy matters. I'm Eddie, by the way, Eddie Torres, acoustic engineer. Of course you are, I said, feeling a headache forming behind my compound eyes. Conference room 7. Now, and someone get Palix. He's going to want to hear this. Blore? 10 minutes later, we were all seated around a table that had been designed to accommodate multiple species. Palix had arrived, along with Krinth, who had come out of retirement specifically for this meeting. Once you've experienced humans firsthand, apparently it becomes impossible to stay away from the drama. Explain, Palix said without preamble. And please, for the love of gravity, tell me you didn't break anything irreplaceable. Captain Tanaka pulled up a holographic display. 6 months ago, our archaeological teams detected anomalous energy readings coming from the vault's location. Readings that matched patterns we had found in Predecessor ruins on Earth. There are no Predecessor ruins on Earth, Krinth said. We surveyed your system. It's clean. That's what we thought too, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. It turns out the Predecessors were really good at hiding things. We found a facility under the Pacific Ocean, buried 3 miles down in the crust, and inside we found instructions. Instructions for what? For knocking, Eddie said, patting his instrument case lovingly. Specifically, the harmonic sequences needed to interface with Predecessor technology. See, they didn't use keys or codes or biometric locks. They used music, rhythm, vibration. The whole universe is just frequencies bouncing off each other, right? They figured out how to talk to matter itself. I felt my headache intensifying. You're telling me the most advanced civilization in galactic history protected their secrets with knock-knock jokes? Not jokes, Captain Tanaka said seriously. How? Mathematics. How? Pure, universal mathematics expressed through sound. It doesn't matter what language you speak or how your brain is wired. A frequency is a frequency. They built their locks to respond to anyone who could figure out the right pattern. And you figured it out, Palix said. It wasn't a question. Took us 4 months and every acoustic engineer Earth could spare, Marcus said. What? Yeah. We knocked. And the vault answered. Krinth made his boiling kettle sound again. This is impossible. The vault has quantum encryption, temporal locks, graviton barriers. You cannot simply knock your way past those. Eddie opened his instrument case. Inside was something that looked like a guitar had gotten into a fight with a physics laboratory and lost. This is a harmonic resonator array. Eddie Mark 7. Custom built. It can generate sound waves across 17 dimensions simultaneously. And before you ask, yes, I named all my instruments Eddie. Makes things simpler. The quantum encryption was actually the easiest part, Marcus added. Quantum states are just probabilities until observed, right? The right frequency can collapse the wave function in predictable ways. The temporal locks were trickier. We had to generate a standing wave that existed simultaneously in multiple time states. That took some creative thinking. Creative thinking, I repeated. You collapsed quantum probabilities and bent time with a guitar. Technically a 17-dimensional harmonic resonator array, Eddie said. But yeah, basically a really complicated guitar. Captain Tanaka's expression turned serious. Here's the thing, Coordinator Threll. So we're not telling you this to brag. We're telling you because of what we found inside. The predecessors didn't lock the vault to keep people out. They locked it to keep something in. She expanded the holographic display. Images filled the air, artifacts, thousands of them, and in the center a structure that made my vision blur just looking at it. That's a gateway, Palix whispered. A functional predecessor gateway. Active, Captain Tanaka confirmed. And linked to something on the other side, something that's been waiting for someone to knock. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The predecessors had vanished without explanation 4 million years ago. Every species in the collective had theories: horror, ascension, horror, voluntary extinction. But nobody knew for certain. And now the humans were saying they had found a door, an open door. What's on the other side? Krent asked, his voice very small. We don't know, Marcus said. We only got the outer chamber open. The gateway itself has its own lock. A big one. We could probably knock our way through given enough time, but Captain Tanaka thought it would be better to inform the collective first. You know, diplomatic courtesy and all that. How generous, I said dryly. We try, Marcus replied with a grin. Palix was studying the holographic data with intense focus. This changes everything.
Yes.
The gateway is active. If there's a chance the predecessors are still out there somewhere, we need to proceed carefully. Every species in the collective will want access to this. That's why we're proposing a joint expedition, Captain Tanaka said. Human acoustic engineers working with collective scientists. We bring the knocking expertise, you bring 4 million years of accumulated knowledge about predecessor technology. Together, we open the gateway properly, safely. Safely, Krent repeated. You want to safely knock on a door that has been locked for 4 million years, behind which could be literally anything from hostile entities to reality-ending weapons. And you think humans are the right choice to help with this? We're the only choice, Eddie said simply. No offense to collective engineering, but you've been staring at this vault for 4,000 years without making progress. We got inside in 6 months, because we approached it differently. Walls, locks, barriers, they're all the same to us. They're just things that haven't been opened yet. There was a certain logic to that. Much as I hated to admit it, the collective had been so focused on building better walls that we had forgotten how to open doors. Meanwhile, humans had apparently spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of knocking until someone answered. I need to bring this to the council, I said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone, but I'll recommend cooperation, with conditions. Conditions are good, Captain Tanaka said. We like conditions. Shows you're taking this seriously. First condition, no unsupervised knocking. Every attempt to interface with the gateway happens with full collective oversight. Second, all findings are shared equally. No hoarding predecessor technology. Third, if something dangerous comes through that gateway, humans don't get to claim they're immune or special or whatever it is you people do. We evacuate together. Bill, Marcus said immediately. Though for the record, we usually are immune or special. It's kind of our thing. That's exactly what I'm worried about, I muttered. The council meeting took place 3 days later via quantum link. Representatives from every major species appeared as holograms around the enormous chamber. The debate lasted for 6 hours. The Velkin wanted to study the vault for another century before touching anything. The Praxis wanted to seal it permanently. The Herm wanted to charge admission and turn it into a tourist attraction, which was so absurd that it actually derailed the entire conversation for 20 minutes. In the end, pragmatism won, or perhaps exhaustion. The vote passed by a narrow margin: joint human and collective expedition, maximum security, maximum caution. 2 weeks later, I found myself on a transport heading toward the Vault of Ancients, accompanied by Marcus, Eddie, Captain Tanaka, and a full science team representing a dozen different species. The Vault asteroid was exactly as impressive as the report suggested, a chunk of rock the size of a small moon, surrounded by defense platforms and patrol ships. As we approached, I could see the entrance the humans had created. It wasn't a breach or an explosion. The Vault asteroid was exactly as impressive as the report suggested. It was simply an opening where there hadn't been one before. Edges smooth and precise. We knocked nicely, Marcus explained when he saw me staring. No point in making a mess if you don't have to. Inside, the vault was beyond description. Corridors that seemed to extend into more dimensions than should exist. Walls covered in script that changed when you looked at it directly. And everywhere, a low hum that I could feel in my bones. The whole structure is resonating, Eddie said. running his hands along a wall with reverence. It's not just a building, it's an instrument. The predecessors built this place to sing. We reached the gateway chamber after what felt like hours of walking. Time got weird inside the vault. Clocks disagreed with each other. Someone's lunch break lasted either 5 minutes or 3 hours depending on who you asked. The gateway itself was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. A circular frame 50 meters across, made from a material that was simultaneously solid and liquid and possibly conceptual. In its center, darkness, not empty. Space darkness. Active darkness. Darkness that moved. Moot. That's the lock, Marcus said, pointing to patterns carved into the gateway's frame. We've analyzed it, translated it, even practiced the sequence. But we wanted everyone here before we tried. Seemed polite. How considerate, Alex said. She had insisted on coming despite her recent promotion making it technically inappropriate for her to be on dangerous missions. Sometimes you just need to see history happen in person. The science team set up monitoring equipment while Eddie assembled his instrument. The Eddie Mark 7 was even more elaborate than I had imagined, with strings and resonators and components that might have been circuits, or might have been decorative. Hard to tell with human technology sometimes. Ready when you are, Captain, Eddie said, fingers hovering over the strings. Captain Tanaka looked around at all of us, or collective scientists, human engineers, military escorts from 6 different species, all of us about to witness something that hadn't happened in 4 million years. Open it, she said. Eddie started playing. I don't have words for the sound he produced. Music implies melody, harmony, structure. This was more fundamental than that. It was mathematics given voice, reality being asked a question in its own language. The gateway responded. Lights appeared in the darkness, patterns, symbols, and slowly, impossibly, the darkness began to thin. Through it, we could see something, a glimpse of another place, structures that hurt to look at, sky that was the wrong color, and in the distance, movement. Is that? Palix whispered. Is that them? The predecessors? Only one way to find out, Marcus said, and before anyone could stop him, he stepped toward the gateway. Wait, I shouted, grabbing his arm with 2 of my hands. We don't know if it's safe. He looked at me with that infuriating human smile. Threll, my friend, safety is just another wall, and you know what we do to walls. You knock on them until they break or open, I said tiredly. Exactly. Besides, we came all this way. Would be rude not to knock on their door after they answered ours. Captain Tanaka sighed. He's going through that gateway no matter what we say. At least if we go with him, we can document what kills us. Science team, get ready. Military escort. Defensive formation. Everyone else, stay close and try not to touch anything that looks important. What if everything looks important? Krynth asked nervously. Then don't touch anything at all. We approached the gateway as a group. The darkness had receded enough to show a clear passage now. On the other side, I could see a platform, a structure, an entire facility that existed in a place that was definitely not our universe. Marcus stepped through first, because of course he did. Nothing exploded. He didn't dissolve or transform or scream in existential horror. He just walked through and turned around, grinning. You guys coming or what? It's amazing in here. One by one we followed, and found ourselves in a place that should not exist. The facility was vast beyond comprehension, not physically large, though it was that too, but vast in the sense that it occupied more space than it had room for. Dimensions folded in on themselves. Corridors led to places that couldn't be reached by walking, but appeared beside you if you thought about them correctly. And everywhere, inscriptions, not warnings or instructions. Invitations. They wanted someone to find this, Palix said, translating the nearest script with shaking hands. They built the vault, locked it, and then left instructions on how to open it. They were waiting for someone curious enough, persistent enough to knock. Waiting for humans, Marcus said quietly. They were waiting for someone like us. Someone too stubborn to accept that a locked door means stay out. We explored for hours, found archives containing the history of species that had existed and vanished before the collective was even imagined. Found technology that made our most advanced equipment look primitive. Found art that existed in more dimensions than we could perceive. Music that could only be heard by beings that didn't exist yet. And at the center of it all, we found a message, carved in every language that had ever existed or ever would exist, visible to every form of perception that had evolved or would evolve. Palix read it aloud. her voice echoing through the impossible space. To whoever has the courage to knock. Welcome. We built walls not to keep you out, but to ensure that only those worthy of what lies beyond would find it. You have proven yourselves persistent, curious, unwilling to accept boundaries as permanent. These are the qualities that matter. The universe is infinite, but most species stop exploring the moment they hit their first wall. You did not. For that, all of this is yours. Use it wisely, use it joyfully, and when you have learned all we have to teach, build your own walls for those who come after you. Make them good walls, strong walls, walls worth knocking on. We will be waiting on the other side. Krenth was crying. Palix was laughing.
Half.
The science team was frantically taking notes while the other half just stood in stunned silence. Marcus looked at me, and for once, his expression was serious. You know what the really funny thing is? We almost didn't come. There was a faction on Earth that said we should leave the vault alone, that some doors are meant to stay closed. But we're humans. We hear someone's knocking on the other side. We knock back, even when it's across 4 million years and half a galaxy. Especially then. I thought about that as we began cataloging the facility. About a civilization that had spanned the stars and then vanished, leaving behind a test. Not a test of strength or intelligence, though those helped. A test of persistence, of curiosity, of the fundamental refusal to accept that anything is truly impenetrable. They had built the ultimate wall and filled it with treasures beyond imagining. And then they had waited to see who would be audacious enough, curious enough, crazy enough to knock. It took 4 million years, but the humans answered. We spent 3 months documenting the facility before returning to collective space. The discoveries we brought back changed everything. Technology, science, philosophy, art. The predecessors had left behind enough knowledge to advance every species in the collective by centuries. But the most important discovery was the simplest one. The predecessors hadn't disappeared. They had graduated. Alls moved on to something beyond physical existence, beyond the normal universe, and they had left the door open for anyone else who wanted to follow, once they were ready. That the most important discovery was the simplest one. The predecessors hadn't disappeared. They had graduated. All you had to do was knock. The humans became celebrities after that. Every facility in collective space suddenly wanted human consultants. Stuck door? Call a human. Encrypted system you can't crack?
Humans.
Ancient ruins that haven't been opened in millennia? You better believe we called the humans. Marcus Webb started a company called Universal Knocking Services. His slogan was no wall too thick, no lock too complex, no door too ancient. We knock things open. That's the deal. Eddie Torres became the collective's first professor of harmonic engineering, teaching a generation of students that sometimes the best way to interface with technology is to ask it nicely in 17 dimensions. And Captain Tanaka, she led the first expedition through the predecessor gateway to whatever lay beyond, taking volunteers from every species who wanted to see where the predecessors had gone. As for me, I kept my position at the Kalvor Nexus. Someone had to maintain things while everyone else was out knocking on the universe's doors, but I kept that get-well-soon card on my desk, a reminder that humans see walls differently than the rest of us. They see invitations. They see challenges. They see something that will open if you just knock loud enough, long enough, persistently enough. And they're teaching the rest of us to see walls that way too. Because in the end, that's what the predecessors wanted. Not for one species to inherit the galaxy, but for everyone to learn that no barrier is permanent. No wall is unbreakable. No door is truly closed. You just have to knock, and keep knocking, until someone answers, or the door opens, or the wall comes down. Usually in that order. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with a Vulcan engineering team who have been trying to access a sealed archive for 2 centuries. I suggested they try knocking. They looked at me like I was insane. I smiled and told them to call Marcus Webb. He makes house calls. After all, no wall in the universe has ever survived once a human decided to knock. And thanks to them, the rest of us are finally learning why that's not a threat. It's a promise, an invitation, a reminder that the universe is full of doors, and all of them will open eventually. You just have to be polite enough to knock first, and persistent enough to keep knocking until something answers. That's the human way. And increasingly it's becoming the collective way too. Because walls are wonderful things. Strong, protective, necessary. But they're so much better when they have doors, and every door, no matter how locked, how ancient, how impossible it seems, is just waiting for someone curious enough to knock. The humans taught us that, and we're never going to forget it. Neither, apparently, did the predecessors. They built the ultimate test and waited 4 million years for someone to pass it. And the humans did it in 6 months. With a guitar, and a smile, and an absolutely unshakable belief that anything that can be locked can be unlocked, if you knock in just the right way. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't seen it happen. Twice. But I did, and now I know the truth. The universe is full of mysteries, full of walls, full of locked doors and sealed vaults and impenetrable barriers. And somewhere out there, a human is getting ready to knock, politely, persistently, and with absolutely no intention of taking no for an answer. The walls never stood a chance.